Great, so in this video, we're gonna be walking you guys through exactly where you should be placing these pelvic wedges. So these little triangle foam pieces that you got in your kit, the 90-degree angle is the part of the wedge that should be facing away from your body. So for both positionings, it's always gonna be facing away from your body at the 90-degree mark. The biggest surface of this triangle wedge, which is this one right here, is gonna be the surface that's contacting your body. So you're gonna be laying face up in bed while you're doing this passive molding is actually what it's called. So it's not actually an active exercise. So if your hip placement calls for the hip wedge to go high in a high position, then you would actually be placing this at your belt line. So at your belt line on the back part of your hip, and then the opposite hip is gonna get a low placement. So they're always offset from one another because of how our hips misalign. So right hip goes in a high position, then your left hip would be in a low position. So the way that you find the spot on your body for this is you feel in your side, right above your hip bone, you've got kind of like the soft spot that sinks in between your hip and your ribs. You can use your thumb right there, soft spot. You're gonna bring your hand around, and right below your index finger, you should feel a bony dimple on your hip. That's the top back part of your hip, and that's where this high position block is gonna be placed. So the block's actually gonna be contacting that bony dimple part of your hip so that it can push your hip forward. Then for a low position on your hips, you would simply, where your leg, if you lift your knee, where your leg meets your glute or your buttocks muscle, that should be pretty close to the bottom part of your hip. And again, you can push in with your thumb and feel where is the bottom of my hip. And this might be hard for some of us to find. But our dummy here, he's not a dummy, he's a really smart guy. Our dummy here is gonna just be placement so that we can really show you guys a physical representation of like what would that look like on the body. So this would be a high position for the wedge. So I would have him go ahead and lift this knee and then simply roll to the side, and you'll see his belt line right about there. 90-degree angle is facing away from his body. He's gonna place the wedge right at that belt line, and then he can put his leg down and lay on that hip wedge. And I'm not sure if you guys can see here, but it actually creates some spacing right below that wedge because it's pulling that part of his hip up. So for the low position, I'll just show you on the same side over here so that you can visually see this. The low wedge would be on the other hip, but this is where it would be placed. So again, lift the knee. It's gonna be close to the corner of the pocket or the center of the pocket, depending on how low someone wears their pants, but where the leg meets the bottom part of his hip, it would be right about there. And then here you can definitely see the space that it creates on the high part of the hip. So when these are placed properly, you're gonna be laying face up in bed. You'll feel how it untorques and untwists your hips. So again, high position is gonna go at belt line, right on the back top part of the hip, and the thickest part of the wedge is gonna be facing towards the outside of your body. So towards the side, and the thin part goes inward. So that's what it looks like. 90-degree angle facing away from your body. Low position, that wedge is gonna follow a line all the way up your leg where it meets the bottom part of your hip at the glute muscle. And then same position where the thin part is facing inward. Cool, so this is your hip positioning. If you have any questions on it, please don't hesitate to ask me. We wanna make sure that you guys are placing these in the proper orientation.